Hi, welcome to Raising Resilience, our Tonnau Talks for today. My name is Dr. Caris John. I'm the Senior Specialist Educational Psychologist in Neath Talbot Local Authority. And today I have with me Loie Roberts, who's an Assistant Educational Psychologist. We record these sessions every Tuesday between 12 and 1. And for those who are listening online, this is a pre-recorded session with a group of parents from Neath Talbot. And they will be able to ask us some questions, which we will answer at the end of this session. So please stay tuned in. If you want to join us live, you can also then ask questions too. So please join us next week if you are able to.
So today's session is all about raising resilience. So can you tell us, first of all, Caris, what is resilience?
Okay, so resilience is a powerful trait that allows individuals to navigate the challenges and setbacks of life with strength and adaptability. At its core, resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, is what we say. It's to be able to persevere in the face of obstacles and to emerge stronger and wiser from difficult experiences. So that basically means is that resilience is only something that we can learn through experience. Unfortunately, with a life, what is guaranteed is that we are going to experience difficult times, difficult emotions as well. But that's all part of life. And the only way that we can become resilient, so to be able to bounce back from other difficult times, is by learning from past experiences. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that can only be learned through experience, and it's really quite a vast thing to be able to have, and it's something we can learn throughout time. But it involves a combination of emotional, mental and psychological processes that enables us to maintain that positive outlook, to be able to regulate our emotions. And when I mean regulate our emotions, I mean not to be saying, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay, I can carry on. It's about recognizing that, do you know what, this is really tough. This is really hard and I'm feeling really upset. And it's about being able to allow those true feelings and emotions to come through, because that's what's really important part of developing resilience. And the next thing, again, is the problem solving. So it's our ability to recognize that difficult feeling and emotion and that hard time, and then to problem solve to be able to cope better. And coping means having those positive expressions of anger and anxiety, for example. We always see them as very negative emotions. They can be very detrimental and hinder us in life, but they are there for a purpose. Feeling angry, feeling anxious are there to keep us safe, and they're positive expressions of resilience, and of our emotions. And so they're really, really important for us to acknowledge. And that problem solving, that then helps us to be able to cope and helps us to be a bit better equipped to manage future traumatic events and difficult events. And again, resilience is not about avoiding or denying negative emotions. Okay, so that's what I mentioned there with the anger and say anxiety. It's about accepting them and maintaining that sense of hope and optimism. Now, I will say with optimism, some people can pride themselves on being extremely optimistic, but what I would question there is, are they bottling those feelings? Are they dismissing those negative challenging thoughts and feelings in order to have unhealthy coping mechanisms, which are avoidance, which are bottling up and things like that? So that's something to keep in mind as well. We need to be able to recognize that these setbacks and failures are part of the human experience. Okay, they don't define us. In fact, they can help build us. Resilience is all about harnessing inner strength drawn upon our support system, so that wider community around us, and developing those coping strategies that allow us to weather life's storms, as they say, Loie.
So resilience is clearly really, really important. You said that it's, not fixed, it's something that can change. And I'm just wondering, what would a resilient child look like?
Okay, so a resilient child is a child that ultimately accepts when things go wrong. Okay. That can be very challenging for our children. And that's something that they have to learn through life. So as you will see with, let's say, toddlers, when things go wrong, they can be very, very frustrated, very angry, and become quite destructive sometimes. So, for example, if a toy isn't doing what they would want it to do, they can bang it and, get really angry and frustrated, and then not really learn from that. And that's okay for our toddlers, because that's the way their brain is built at that time. That's what we'd expect. But seeing that behavior in an older child or a teenager, that shows that they're not resilient. So what we need to be able to recognize, a resilient child would be able to cope with those difficult feelings, difficult experiences. Um, and in order to do that, they can't be overprotected by adults around them. And this can be really tough, being a parent, is that sometimes in order to avoid our child experiencing, tough feelings or tough challenges, we often really want to divert them and or distract them or hide these experiences from them. You often see it in schools where they aren't winners and losers in sports day, which is a lovely idea ultimately. However, it doesn't prepare our children for failure in life, which unfortunately is guaranteed in life. When you think about the children who are resilient, they would still persevere. A resilient child would still try and overcome a problem. So when we talked about in last week's Tonnau talks about confidence, it's all about those children trying and having that growth mindset of, I can't do it yet. I need to try harder. I need to try something different. And that is essential as part of developing resilience, is that they'll still try even though they've experienced failure. Now, failure has very difficult emotions attached to it, and that's one thing that's really important for development of independence and future life skills. So, for example, if a child has been protected from experiencing failure, Louis, as an adult, then when they go to apply for college courses or apply for jobs, we all know we're not going to get the first job we apply for. Very lucky if we do, but often that's not the case. And if you're not a resilient child, you wouldn't then apply for another job, because you'd be so uncomfortable with that feeling of failure that you wouldn't do it again, because that's the thing, you've been protected from it and not validated those feelings. And it's important that it's our responsibility as adults to co-regulate and co-problem solve with them. Okay, it's not about an adult just buying another toy because a child has broken it. It's about how you can solve that together. If a child gets frustrated with their younger sibling for taking something off them, we need to help our children to understand those difficult feelings and emotions related to that experience, and then to help them to resolve it.
So what happens then if a child is struggling to develop their resilience? So we sort of feel that they're unable to develop resilience.
So, for example, if a child has low resilience, it's likely that they may, have a very difficult time in recognizing emotions. So, the emotional literacy, as we call it, so the ability to recognize their emotions, cope cope with healthy sort of coping mechanisms with their emotions, and also recognize different emotions in others. So they would have very little understanding of that as well. For example, if they've been ignored, so they've become upset about something, and they've been ignored for those feelings, they won't then know how to recognize them in themselves. They will then try to ignore them in themselves, and that's not helpful. We need to be able to help our children identify that it's okay to have these feelings and emotions, so that they don't bottle them up. They need support to know that all emotions are okay, and having safe ways of expressing those emotions as well. I talked about the fixed mindset. Children who have a fixed mindset are very very unresilient. They don't believe that they can succeed. And that ultimately really hinders their life opportunities, because they won't try new things. They won't take risks in order to experience, getting a new job, maintaining new relationships, things like that in life, which are essential. They will also fail to kind of take on new hobbies and interests because they fear that fear of not knowing, they're not going to take that risk. And that's really important, that children who aren't resilient, who develop poor resilience, they won't have those same opportunities as other children.
And from what you're saying, resilience is a really, really important factor in a child's development. Having that ability to cope with challenges that they're going to face in life, and having that view of themselves negatively if they feel maybe they're less than their peers, that will actually stop them from branching out and trying new things and experiencing some things that are actually going to be really key for their development.
Yeah, absolutely, Larry. But, like anything, it's something that can fluctuate through our lives, like I talked about with confidence last week. And, it's something that they can view themselves very negatively in that sense. It's something that needs to be worked on, which is why we've developed this Tonnau Talks today. There's areas in their life where we can become more confident and resilient. It's about balance, and it's about using moments where you've been resilient in the past and then transferring those experiences and those problem-solving skills into other areas of their life. I'm wondering, Larry, would you be able to tell us a bit more about how resilience develops across the childhood into adolescence?
Yeah, so there's lots of different theories, if you were to go onto the internet, that you could read about resilience. But one that I'm going to discuss today is by Dr. Ginsberg, who was a child pediatrician and human development expert. And what they suggested was that there's 7 things needed to develop resilience, and these are known as the 7 C's. So the 7 C's stands for competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control.
Okay, so let's start with competence. What do you mean by competence, Larry?
So competence is the ability to do something successfully, effectively, or efficiently. So in order to be competent, you usually have to have the specific skills or knowledge to complete that task in the first place.
Okay, so that means some kids can only have this if they have the skills and knowledge. But how does that affect kids of different ages then?
So when we think about competence developmentally, if we maybe consider a typically developing early years child, so we're thinking of a child here about 0 to 5 years, I'm going to pick just one skill, and that's just going to be the sort of ability to do hand-eye coordination. These are known as fine motor skills.
Yeah.
So we would expect a child of around 0 to 5 to be able to eventually, thread different beads, maybe stack different blocks, but they're not yet at a stage where they're competent to use a scissors to cut around a piece of paper.
Okay.
Whereas a primary school child, they've got a little bit more development, and we would potentially expect them to be able to use a scissor, so they would be competent to cut around a piece of paper. And why this is so important is because with that competence, we need to be mindful as adults supporting them that children, they've all got different needs going on, different strengths, different interests. And in order to be competent at a skill, they have to have that ability in the first place.
Okay. So you're talking about the different competences there. So we need to be mindful with developing resilience is that this skill and knowledge needs to be developed at an appropriate level, isn't it? So what we'd expect that our nursery age children can do, we wouldn't, we'd expect that to then develop throughout the ages. So when we're thinking about developing resilience for our children with regards to competences, to be mindful about where that child is at that stage of development.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's about reducing our own expectations around that, to be honest, because, sometimes, we might be working with a child who's a lot older. We may be comparing them to things like developmental milestones, but actually, where are they developmentally and what are they competent in doing in order to build their resilience?
And again, that takes us back to, the Tonnau Talks that we did with Understanding Your Child, is that recognising that children at different developmental stages can do different things. And also we can't define our children by developmental stages as well.
No.
So, you are now a teenager, so you should be able to do this. So, and that's what we need to recognize, is that just because they're a teenager, just because they're 8 years old, doesn't mean they can do these things. Actually, what they need is more support and help to be able to do those things, developing on that growth mindset so that you can't do it yet, and I'm going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about the next one. So what about confidence? And I know we talked about this a lot last week, Laurie, in our last week's Tonnau talks, but just give me a little bit about talk about what confidence actually means.
So confidence in oneself is that sort of ability to be able to carry out that task with that optimism that, yeah, I've got this, things are in my control, I know what I'm doing, I know what I need to do. So I think what's key when we're sort of reflecting on the difference between competence and confidence is that some children may be very competent. They might have that skill and that ability to be able to complete a task. However, they may not have the confidence to do it yet. And this is going to be really, really important when we're thinking about how we're going to develop a child's resilience, because often we sort of hear children and adults working together, and the adult says, oh, well, you did it yesterday, or I've seen you do this before, or you've done it before, like try it again. Like, I know you can do it. But the difference is, yes, they may be competent, they may have those skills, but on this occasion, for whatever reason, they may not have the confidence to go through with it.
And you often see that in cases where children, are very good at their sport, but they're too afraid to go into competitions, and you think, oh, no, but you're so good. You're really brilliant at that. You could do so well. But they're like, no, I don't want to do it. And that, again, is their confidence coming out there, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we don't need to talk about too many strategies today, because I know we discussed a lot last week on how to develop that confidence there.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So what do you mean by connection then?
So connection is the third C. And when I'm talking about connection here, I know it can have lots of different meanings to different people, but I'm going to focus on that social connection today. And I can't really focus on the importance of connections without mentioning Brené Brown. So Brené Brown defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they can derive sustenance and strength from a relationship. So this does sound quite complex, reading out that definition alone. But I think what Brené Brown's really alluding to here is that connection is going to be key in developing a child's resilience. So from the sort of earliest stages of development, we form attachments with the caregivers around us. And one way of looking at this is something called the circles of security.
Okay, tell us a bit more about that then, Laurie.
So as an adult and a trusted adult in a child's life, we want to provide them with the love, the nurture, and the care so that they feel safe and secure. They've got a sense of identity, that they've got their confidence, and they're feeling competent. So with the circles of security, you can imagine ourselves as being the hands holding that child and reassuring them. However, in order for that child to develop their resilience, we have to give and let them go out and explore the world around them. And when they're out exploring the world, it's about us, making sure that we're managing, the tasks so that they're competent to do it, reassuring them that they've got the confidence, and letting them fail.
Letting them take risks, isn't it, Laurie? And that can be really tough as a parent when you know best, but obviously your child wants to explore and get that independence, take those risks. And often it's really difficult for us to stand back and go, look, I don't think that's the right thing to do. But it's your choice, and they it's good for our children to take those risks, and because they'll learn from those risks.
Absolutely. And I know, we often talk about children, they're blank slates, they've not experienced these different things before. And the worst thing we can sort of do is just give people advice, because they're not going to feel motivated, or they're going to think they know better, especially our teens, and so on and so forth. So it's about letting them fail, letting them take those risks. However, what's key with connection is that when it does maybe not go as they best hoped or in the way that they wanted, we're there to reassure, we're there to rebuild and connect with that child on that one-on-one level. You know, that adult needs to be there because, like we said, they haven't been here before, they haven't experienced these things before.
And a key thing there as well is staying out of judgment as well, you know, instead of saying, oh, well, I told you so. That's not connection, is it, Louie? Let's just get that clear. It's about saying, do you know what? You made the wrong choice there, and that's tough. I'm wondering what you can do differently next time.
I think that's key, isn't it? It's holding that unconditional positive regard for that child, that, do you know what? You've messed up or things didn't go to plan, but we can connect, and through that connection, we can problem solve this together moving forward.
Absolutely. So, what does character mean, Laurie?
So character is about being in touch with your own morals, your beliefs, values, and even though you face challenges, are you still going to stick to them? Are you going to go back to them? Or maybe we're going to have to reflect and change some of the morals and beliefs that we've had moving forward. So I suppose when we sort of think about our toddlers, they sort of develop their character through their family, really, and their immediate environment around them. So we're talking stuff like culture, ethnicity, religion, social class. They're already maybe starting to develop in nursery settings, you know, regards to their like sort of moral behaviours, you know, in terms of sharing, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we still need to lower our expectations. They're a child, they're an early years child, and yes, they are going to snatch. Yes, they are going to have probably quite a elevated response when things don't go their way, and that's because they're an early years child. Whereas maybe when we move on to sort of our primary school children, you know, they're starting to have an awareness of a fairness, you know, they're starting to understand the necessity of rules in order to sort of fit into society and to make friends. And I think what's cool is they might actually want to start participating in the rules. So we need to give them options to do that, to develop their resilience. Okay, well, if this rule doesn't work, what could we do instead? What's worked before?
And I think that's important when you think talking about nursery age, just brings into that. It's like, you know, those toddlers always ask why. And it's so important that we try to give them, you know, an explanation, because that is them trying to understand the world, you know, and giving them those reassurances, giving them those explanations at an age appropriate level that they can understand as well. It's really important because, like you were saying, with, you know, with our primary age children, you know, they get morals, they're often telling us things aren't fair, you know, and it's really part of them understanding the world around them.
And I think another thing that's sort of key with this sort of age, this sort of primary school development, is they start to develop a really, really powerful tool, which is empathy. That ability to consider another person's perspective, to actually recognize that there's other things going on in this world. And
because you notice with toddlers, they're very what you call egocentric in that sense. It's all about them. They, you know, they'll quite happily snatch a toy off another child. That child could be crying their eyes out, and they don't care. They don't show any kind of empathy for that child, and that's normal. That's what we'd expect. But you know, empathy doesn't kick in till at least 8 and above, and it obviously, when we think developmentally, happens at a range of different stages for children. But we wouldn't expect it to happen before 8. So when you think about our primary school children, that huge sense of, oh my gosh, what have I done? Or even kind of trying to understand someone else's feelings. That's really tough. That's a big thing to start to develop, isn't it, Laurie?
Absolutely. Like, you're questioning your character there, aren't you? Which is part of your resilience. So understandably, we can see why, you know, children start to question things, and they do experience, you know, differences in their behavior and how they're feeling different emotions. And just quickly as well, when we're thinking about character, we can't talk about character without mentioning that teenage brain.
Yes.
You know, we've got
complex.
that complex teenage brain. You know, we've got the influence of social media, and they have a very strong belief of what's right or wrong. And we're not going to go into too much of the anatomy of the teenage brain now, but you know, we've got the opinions of others being so important to them. Yet they also have this huge connection with their families, that they don't want to let them down, and their own family's morals. And that's quite complicated, isn't it, for adults and parents and carers to navigate around that for our teenagers, because you sort of think, oh, have I overstepped them up myself or have I not? Should I have given them more guidance? Should I give them less guidance?
And that's a really important thing to mention there, Lois, about our teens, is that there's this misconception that our teens don't want to talk to their families and they just focus on their friends. And I know we did a Tonnau talks on the talking to teens, and we did some information there about the teenage brain. And yes, do you know what, their peer relationships, the values that their peers have are highly influential, but we can't forget that they're still connected with their family and they still want that connection, even though they may appear reluctant and disengaged. Actually, they don't always want to be on their own in their room all day long.
No.
You know, they still want that connection. It's still really important.
And it's hard because the adults around them ultimately are judging their character.
Yeah.
You know, who are you going to be? Are you
Yeah.
going to go to university?
Yeah.
Are you going to get an apprenticeship?
Yeah.
That's got to be really hard for them to like take on board as well, in terms of building their resilience, isn't it? Having all these judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Laurie, tell me a little bit about what you mean with contribution.
So moving along the 7 C's, contribution is thinking about what can you contribute to this world, what can you bring to this world. And I really love the work by Martin Seligman. You know, he sort of discusses like meaning as belonging and serving something greater than oneself. It's about having a purpose in life. And I think this is really, really key in developing resilience, because we've got to have a purpose, and I think we've got to have goals. Having those goals gives us a sense of hope, and it can help and inspire and motivate us and to try new things and to take on new tasks and think, do you know what, let's give it a go. And I think if we have a strong sense of contribution of what we're going to bring to this world, even when things don't necessarily go to plan, that will help our resilience, because it's about knowing, do you know what though, if I know I've messed up, but I know in the grand scheme of things down the line, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have really made a difference in someone's life. It may not be right now, but it will happen. And it's keeping in mind that progress isn't going to be linear for our children and young people as well. They're going to need support to understand what they can contribute. And, you know, even we can start this from a young age. You know, we can think of toddlers, you know, what's going on around them. You know, they might not necessarily have that. Well, no, they don't have that ability to understand, oh, what's my greater purpose? It's only them. You know, we've said they're quite egocentric, but the adults around them can start to bring their awareness to them during conversations and ultimately through play activities, so on and so forth.
And also, you always know, like toddlers, they desperately want to copy us as adults, always wanting to help, always wanting to, you know, pretend to hoover and clean things and use a dustpan and brush. And that's part of them feeling connected with the family, is that this is their contribution. This is, I'm going to, you know, be like mum or dad, you know, I'm going to be like my big brother and kick a football around, or whatever it may be. You know, it's really important that the family influence around our toddlers in terms of, you know, developing their sense of contribution is really important.
It is. And the same sort of with our children and teens, and I'm kind of going to group these a little bit here, but, you know, what can they contribute? How can we raise that? You know, is it raising money? Is it giving back to different charities? Is it about sort of thinking about, you know, what they'd want to be in the future? Like, who do you want to be? And do you know what? They may say some crazy things. You know, often it's, I'm going to be Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm going to be Messi, or I'm going to go on Love Island. And it's about us avoiding the judgment on that. It's about exploring that. Okay, well, what is it about that person that you really like? Because using those reflective questions is going to help build their resilience, because it's going to make them question their sort of character again, so you can see how all these 7Cs start to link with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that's really come out in the research, isn't it? Most recently is about the importance of giving children jobs within the home. Now, I know giving a child chores comes with a lot of disdain and, you know, not very positively received, but it is so important for our kids' sense of contribution as well, and it helps develop their independence, helps them to feel part and connected with the family, you know, gives them those feelings of competence, you know. So thinking about, and I know when we talked about confidence in our Tonnau talks last week, one of the strategies that we mentioned there was about giving responsibilities to our kids. that, you know, more and more evidence has shown that it's really, really important to make them feel part of the working model of the home, you know, and again, sets them up for life, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So thinking about what we've said so far, the next one is coping. What do you mean by coping, Lori?
So coping isn't just about going, how are you doing? I'm fine. I'm good. I've got this all together. I think stereotypically and historically in British society, we've all been sort of accustomed to this stiff upper lip. You carry on and you just keep going. But actually, coping is a lot more than that. It's about having that ability to recognize and identify when maybe you're not feeling well or when you actually need support. And what we need to be doing is supporting our children and young people to find different strategies that will support their well-being moving forward when things go wrong. You know, it's about us as adults modeling those different things. You know, often we see sort of parents, carers, you know, visibly upset, and you know, you say, oh, it's my hay fever, or oh no, I'm fine, I just got something in my eye. And actually it's not about that, is it? It's about showing them that no, actually I'm finding it hard to cope right now, and I am finding this difficult, and it's about accepting that all these different emotions are okay, but through the support of the adults around them with those positive relationships, connections, that we can support them to find different strategies.
And that's something really important to mention is as parents, as role models. And we need to be mindful that, you know, we've got to share in an appropriate way as well, you know.
Absolutely.
So, you know, there's certain things we would share, certain things that we would hold back from our kids, because obviously, you know, it's some things we do need to protect from our children. But yes, you know, when we are finding things difficult, it's to say, do you know what, I'm feeling this is really tough today, you know, because that's what our children can learn, and those coping strategies of, do you know what, I found it really difficult to put these shelves together. It's really frustrating me. I don't know what to do. I'm wondering what's probably best to do. Maybe I should look at the instructions. You know, maybe I should have a break and have a cup of tea and come back to it. You know, it's about us helping our children to see that, you know what, we also have tough times too. Sometimes we need to problem solve out loud. You know, I know a lot of parents try to be like super optimistic, super strong, super confident, just to try and hopefully, you know, spread those qualities on our children. But actually it was far better, instead of always being the adult that's got it together and, you know, working perfectly, it's sometimes better to go, do you know, I'm having a tough day today.
Absolutely.
You know?
And that's not life, is it? Either, you know, we see it, you know, our teens looking at social media, these perfect lives. That is not reality. We need to be, like you said, teaching them these different strategies to cope, so that when they face this challenge again in the future or something similar, they know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Increasing their resilience.
Absolutely, Lori. Okay, so let me just think about we've talked about here the different the 7 C's. We've got coping, character, connection, contribution, confidence, competence, and control is the last one, Lori.
Yeah, control is the last of the 7 C's. So this one is quite difficult, because when we think of ourselves, you know, most people like to be in control. We like to know what's happening, you know, we like to be able to predict and foresee what's going to happen in the future. But unfortunately, we can't do that in life. You know, sometimes, you know, there might be an exam coming up. We don't know what questions are going to come up. We don't know how difficult they're going to be. And sometimes, you know, we can have wider things that happen that are completely out of our control and can really throw us. You know, sort of different traumas and losses and bereavements. And this is really, really hard for adults to do, let alone children and young people. You know, we need to be mindful that some of the young children and young people we're working with, you know, they may have been told, you know, to seek that control. They'll find different ways to do that. And a lot of the time they can act as though they have control, but actually they're feeling huge experiences of out of control. They're feeling really big emotions like embarrassment and guilt. and shame.
They're really difficult emotions to feel, aren't they?
They are. And what we want to be doing is validating these emotions, saying to them, like, I can understand why this is hard. Things are feeling out of your control.
Yeah.
That must be really worrying for you.
Yeah.
It might actually be a little bit frightening.
Yeah.
And it's validating those emotions. And that's what's going to be key. And you can see how all the other seven C's link into that then, that connection going, all right, I've got someone here who can help me here. Character, oh, someone gets me, someone understands where I'm coming from. Validation is key there.
Yeah. And again, with control as well, you sometimes get children that won't compete in competitions for their chosen sport. Now, when we talked about competence, gosh, they're really skilled. They've really got really capable of competing in these competitions. But actually, their sense of control, they feel like, well, so and so is better than me. There's no point in me trying to compete because they're better than me. And it's about recognizing, do you know what? Yeah, that Sophie's faster than you, or Billy's better at dancing than you. He's does all the different twists and turns, whatever it may be, and saying, yeah, but what can you do to do better? And that's the thing, is putting that control back to them. Is that, yeah, do you know what? You can't control what Sophie and Billy do, but you can control what you do and what you can do to improve, or you to do other things, So it's really important to look at that in sense to support our kids with developing their resilience.
So we've talked about these 7 C's, Caris, and I know as we've sort of gone through, you sort of alluded to earlier that, for when we're talking about some of the strategies, being like open and honest about how we communicate things, being role models, we still need to be mindful, though, that children are at different stages in their development. So what do we need to be doing here? Should we start off with nursery children?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are going to be resilience boosting parenting strategies through the ages. Now, the one thing I will mention is that the strategies that are suitable for our nursery age still continue through life, So these are some of the things that are for our nursery age children, very young children only recently have mastered skills of walking and talking. They may not be able to express their anxieties and fears, so they don't have that language. That doesn't mean they're not understanding what's going on around them. It's really, really important. We think they're too young to know what's going on. We may not talk to them, because they don't respond back, but actually they're taking on so much more than we realise.
If anything, they're at that stage of their development where their brains are even more highly attuned to what's going on around them because they don't have these verbal skills yet.
Yeah.
They're watching everything.
Absolutely. And when we think about our younger children are more attuned to us as adults than teenagers are, because our younger children are heavily focused on us and heavily reliant on us. So they will notice a lot more that's going on with us than maybe our teenagers would. So just bear that in mind, they can absorb frightening events. If we're watching the TV and there's some frightening things going on there, it's incredible what they can absorb, and then what they will actually perceive as going on. So a lot of our children, I recall when the sad circumstances of Ukraine, a lot of our younger children were extremely frightened that there was going to be world war. Now, that fear is real because it was and it continues to be such a significantly tragic thing that's going on, frightening. But we need to be mindful about what is available to our little ones, because even though they can't understand all the big words, they can certainly take on the emotions and attune to those emotions. So when we think about our nursery age children and we want to attune to them, we want to engage with them, they'll actually do the same to us. So like you were saying, that example you gave of feeling tearful and actually saying, no, I got hay fever, they will be able to see that the emotions involved in having hay fever and emotions involved with being crying, very different. So they will be able to pick up on those. You need to be mindful, watching out for your children's signs of like fear and sadness, because they may not be able to put those into words. So even if they can't talk, they do understand, like I said, and have your children become more clingy or needing more hugs than usual? Have they started to old habits after you thought they'd outgrown those behaviours. And we often see that in our children. One minute they're toilet trained through the night, and the next minute they're wet in the bed, and we think, oh gosh, what's going on there? And it's just to be mindful about noticing these subtle changes, just so that we can support our kids, because they are an example of our children taking on, the feelings of the world around them.
Absolutely. And development isn't a linear process, is it? And it's just like resilience. It's going to change throughout a child's development. There's going to be some tasks that they can take on, which are easier, and others that they're going to find harder.
Absolutely. It's really important then you as a role model as well. So, like you mentioned again with that example of a parent crying and saying it's hay fever, we need to role model resilience boosting behaviours. So it would be those things of, do you know what? Yes, I am crying. Because with us trying to lie to our children, they'll only see through it. So what we need to acknowledge is that, yeah, do you know why I am crying? I'm just feeling a bit sad today, and it maybe, oh, but I'm just having a bit of a tough day today. I got too much on, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Because kids will recognize when you're frustrated, and when you drop something and it's you get really angry at yourself more so than usual. They'll recognize that because I just had a tough day today, and I think I need to have a cup of tea. That'll make me feel a bit better. And these things we really do need to verbalize around our little children, so that they can have that verbal commentary. Use play as well. When we think about that, it's describing what we're saying. Also, you can do it through play. So you can use like cars or dolls, whatever your child's interested in. If two cars hit together, be like, oh gosh, this poor car must be hurt now. And you might sound silly to yourself, but actually it's a really good way of helping our little kids to start to understand linking actions with those feelings, and then being able to validate those feelings. It's okay to have those feelings, and then what can we do to make them better? And that's what we need to be mindful with our little ones. Play is really helpful. It's like a security blanket when they just feel lonely and confused, helping them, to feel, to recognize. So, always try and see that with your children.
And that's it, isn't it? Children invest through play. So just sort of reflecting on that section there, we've sort of said the importance of having that key sort of role model, providing that verbal commentary throughout of what is going on, because what this is going to do when we link it back to the start, resilience is about recognizing these emotions within us and thinking about what we can eventually do to move them forward. So what about our primary school children then, Caris?
Okay, so still using those strategies that I mentioned with our nursery children, that still applies, but obviously in a more age appropriate manner. Our primary school children might be starting to form new friendship groups, and we all know there's trials and tribulations with that, participate in new group activities, and that's daunting, isn't it? As they kind of start to come into their own, when they start to, have that character, as we say, coming through. What's really helpful is that, they start to learn about things outside of kind of their just home environment or their interests, in school, and they look to teachers as well as their parents to make them feel safe, and to help them to sort things out. So they constantly are looking to you to solve their problems. And that's normal, because ultimately our primary school age children are experiencing these new things that they don't know what to do with. It might be the first time they've ever fallen out with a friend, and they don't know how to cope with that. And again, if they're starting to develop empathy, there's all those other feelings coming through of shame and guilt, which are horrendous. So it's really important that, we provide them with, what I describe as psychological safety. That's where a child can feel safe with you, whether it's at home or in school, where they know that there is a place to go where they can feel listened to and safe. So that is about the psychological safety, is all about how they feel within themselves. Okay, so it's all about that I can come to you and I can sit with you, and I know that you will listen to me, validate me, and help me to come up with solutions, instead of you'll tell me off for feeling these emotions, tell me off for my behavior which caused these emotions, and then tell me exactly what I need to do, resolve it, which is something that I can't do yet.
Mm.
So again, psychological safety is that place where someone can go and go, do you know what? I made the wrong choices, or something's happened that I'm feeling really sad about and I don't know what to do.
And I think what's great about that psychological safety is that it's providing that kids with that security blanket, especially that confidence to then take risks, because they know I'm going to have that unconditional positive regard when I come back.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that's helpful for them, Caris?
Again, talking to them, it's a bit different to that verbal commentary. So when we talked about our nursery children, that verbal commentary of what's going on, talking to them is about answering those questions. Children do notice things, and especially with quite significant events in families where there may be, someone who's seriously unwell, they will notice these things. And I think it's really important that we talk to our children about what's going on within reason. I know we need to have appropriate boundaries of what they can be told, but it's really important that we do try and be as honest with our kids as appropriate for their age. It helps them to feel part of that, your family again, is that connection with you, helps them with their coping as well, and also yours too, because if a child is going through difficulties, and that again, these difficulties are a good thing because they develop that resilience, we need to be able to listen to their concerns and fears, and let them know that we're there for them. So again, it's validating. It's going, I understand why you feel that way, and I can imagine it's really tough. It's these kind of sentences that we need to say to them, because that's non-judgmental. Instead of saying, why did you do that? I told you not to do that. We often, do things like that because we become frustrated, or we'll go, oh, don't worry about it. Come and go and play your Xbox, or, go on TikTok or whatever, just because you desperately want to divert them from those feelings because you're trying to protect them, but actually it's in an unhelpful way. And normalizing those feelings is another thing we need to do. We need to recognize that, do you know what? Going through difficult times, like when we've got our year sixes now, they're going to be transitioning, they've got a lot of worried feelings going on, and we need to normalize that. Instead of saying, don't worry, you're going up with your friends, you'll be fine, your big brother's in that school, they'll look after you. What we need to normalize and go, do you know, I get why you're feeling really worried, because you love your primary school, and actually you're going to be really sad to leave it. And that's much better than trying to distract a child away from those feelings, and it would be things like to develop their resilience, be like, I'm wondering what would be helpful on your first day of school. What could be helpful just to make you feel a little bit better? I'm wondering whether we need to connect with your friend in the summer holidays in order to make you feel a little bit better. And it's always a little bit better. We can't promise rainbows and things like that. It's because that's not realistic. But we can give them the hope to be able to cope with these challenging situations.
And I think that's key, isn't it? It's relating back to that competence. It's adapting it. We know our children best. We know what they're competent of.
Yeah.
But actually, for some children in that moment, let's make it a little bit easier so that they can achieve and move going forward. Let's create that psychological safety for them, like you said, which is key. Let's make sure we're validating those emotions, and then moving on from that, supporting them to problem solve using stuff like I wonder, or giving them two options. So how can we add on these strategies as resilience develops, as we grow? We're going to keep adding on these strategies. What else could we do for our teens?
Oh, independence would be the big one. Now, this is a really tough one because we've got our nursery age and primary age who are very happy to have us do things for them. And, ultimately as parents, we're quite happy to do it for them too, Independence with our teens, I think sometimes is the hardest thing for us as parents to let go, because we desperately want to safeguard them. We definitely, we want to keep them away from experiencing, negative feelings, but it's really, really important that we allow them to develop those independent skills. It's such a struggle when we think about what our teens go through, those academic demands. As we know, a lot of our teens have been going through their GCSE exams and A levels, and that's extremely stressful. That is often the most stressful moment in their life. And as adults, even, they can reflect back and go, do you know what, that was so stressful? Because ultimately it's their first experience of stress for a lot of children, so that is the biggest thing that they've felt at that time, and that can be really, really challenging, really upsetting and frightening for a lot of our kids. So resilience is so important for them to have during these times, because they have to go through these exams, they have to go to school even though they desperately don't want to. But we need to develop their resilience so that they do still get up in the morning, they still try instead of giving up. And again, now next week we're going to be talking about children who refuse to go to school, and that can be really, really important when we're thinking about resilience. It's essential for our children to be able to get up in the morning, go to a place where they may find difficult. That's tough, but our resilient children do keep going. It's important when we're thinking about our teens, is like, reinforcing that empathy, because a lot of our teens can feel like they're being ganged up on, being misinterpreted and things like
well,
that.
no, nobody gets them, do
Yeah,
they?
absolutely. Except for their friends,
Yeah.
and we need to empathize with them, because we've been there, we've been teens, and it was a difficult time, and that's why we need to help them to see that we are that place of psychological safety. We can understand. It doesn't mean that we need to accept certain choices of behaviors. That's not what I'm saying, but we can certainly empathize with it,
And I think that's key as well, isn't it? It's about setting those boundaries to help them feel safe and comfortable. Like when we think about resilience and those 7 C's, that competence, there's no point setting them a task that they can't do, or there's too loose boundaries, because that isn't going to help their resilience either.
No.
They still at a very, very important stage of their development where they need that security, they need those boundaries to move forward and develop.
Absolutely. And you think about you said about the influences of social media and things like that, it's not good for their resilience, social media, because often what we're seeing on social media is the extreme of perfection, and that's not normal, that's not real life. And it's important that we recognize that for our teens and say, look, I can understand that you want to be like that, but that's not reality. I appreciate you for you and what you do. So reflecting back on their character, their wonderful qualities that they've got, the contribution that they give to life, and that connection you have with them, and their competence, what they can do. And that's what we need to be focusing on, what they can do, rather than what everyone else is doing around in the world outside of their immediate inner circles.
And I think that's key, isn't it? It's like you said, we've talked about like the role models and everything moving forward, but it's teaching them to work hard. It's letting them fail, isn't it? Like letting them have opportunities to fail, but that's also safe and secure for them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When we're sort of teaching them to work hard, it's sort of showing them that they are going to have to put a bit of grit into things sometimes. And I think that's key with resilience, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Laurie. So let's move on to our top tips.
Okay, so we're going to relate back to those wonderful 7 C's, and just have a think about what we can do for each one of them to develop it moving forward. So when we're thinking about character, who that child is, what are their morals, what are their beliefs? I think, like we just discussed, what's key here is actually teaching them that things are going to go wrong, and it's not always going to work. And developing, I think, key for patience for them as well. It's really, really important, giving them that sense of patience, but also knowing that there's hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And if you graft and hard enough, you will get there eventually. You just haven't got there yet.
Yeah, and that links us back to that growth mindset, doesn't it, Lily, from last week?
Yeah. Then we have control. So we talked about all the verbal commentary and how we can change and adapt that at the different stages. So with the toddlers, it's almost like that running commentary to help them identify and recognize different emotions. Whereas when we sort of grow up, it's actually more commentary about, look, I can see that you're not feeling this. I can understand why that's hard. And having that key role model as well to showcase that.
Yeah. And it's about understanding there's what's within their control, not what's outside. And, it's really important to focus on that so that they feel that they can be able to have that growth mindset, to be able to overcome adversity, which is resilience.
Yeah. Then we have connection. And again, it's key, a key part of resilience is acknowledging that I'm actually finding things hard and then being able to go to that supportive adult or parent, whoever it is, who can give them validation, validation that they're not alone, that they have that unconditional positive regard for them.
Yeah, and remember, validation is all about understanding and accepting the feeling that's related to the behavior. It doesn't mean you're accepting their behavior. It means you're understanding why they feel that way.
Yeah. Confidence, then it's about creating that psychological safety. We have that holding that empathy for children so that they know that there's someone there for them even when things go wrong. That's going to give them confidence to try new things even if things are quite difficult.
Yeah.
Coping, again, offering those two different options, using questions such as I wonder, or what have you tried before, what's worked before when you've been in these situations, to help them problem solve, to develop that resilience. Contribution, then, I know this is really, really, really hard, and I know all we want to do is protect our children, but we have to give them opportunities to fail. And I'm not saying that these are going to be extreme at all, but safe things that we can go, do you know what? That didn't go to plan. What can we do instead?
Yeah.
And then last but not least is competence. And here we need to be really mindful of our own expectations as adults on the children and young people we're supporting. Do they actually have the skills and ability to facilitate that skill yet? Lowering our expectations can sometimes be key here. And thinking about all our child's strengths and interests and how you can then support them to move forward with that in a way that they have competence, that control, moving forward.
Thank you, Laurie. That's excellent few top tips there, and I like how they've linked in with our 7 C's of resilience. Now it's time for some questions. So, Laurie, can you tell us some of the questions that have come through?
Yeah, right, let's have a look here. So me and my partner are going through a divorce. I'm not sure what to do. You've said that you need to be open and honest about things, but I don't want the kids to be upset. But more contextual information. One's just finished their 2nd year of comp, and the other is due to transition.
Okay, so transition from year 6, I assume, to comp. Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's a really challenging time for you and your partner, and ultimately your whole family. But what I would say is that it is important to be open and honest, and I can understand why you don't want to upset your children. That's the last thing we want to do. However, what we do need to recognise that there are going to be some significant changes happening, and what we need to do is to be able to support our children through those changes. And the key for whenever we're going through such a change is to give them that knowledge and understanding. So it would be explaining that this is going to happen. Okay, so me and whoever is husband or wife, whoever, if both of you can explain to your children, that would be even better. But if you can explain together to say, look, this is going to be happening, we are going to be splitting up, and it's really upsetting. We're really sad that it's happening because ultimately you will be, and that it's really important to reflect back that, we desperately don't want things to change too much for you, but we know that they will. Okay, so these are some of the things that are going to change. So you need to give your children some information about what is going to change so that they've got that preparation. Then they need to know, when is it going to change? Okay, and it's really important that you can keep that communication going with your children, because they will have questions, and it's allowing them to ask those questions. Now, some of those questions you might have to say, look, do you know what? I understand why you want to know that answer, but I'm not able to give it to you right now. Do you have any other questions? That's okay to say that, because some questions might be inappropriate and not age appropriate for them as well. And again, it's just to be mindful is that you need to think about this huge change and just supporting them with enough information that is appropriate for their age. Now, if you've got I know you said you've got one that's just in the second year of comp, and the other one is due to transition. So they're approximately around the age of 10 to 13. Obviously, you've got differences in brain development there, and maybe emotional responses. Be mindful for those changes in their behaviours, because it's important for you then to recognise that, so you can say, look, I noticed you've been, a bit quiet recently. I'm wondering if you're worried about what's going on at home here. Is there any questions you have? What can we do to help you feel a bit better? It might be that the behaviour is more a bit outwardly, and they're being a little bit more you know, refusing to do things or being angry and upset, and that's okay. I get why you're feeling angry and upset with us, because we're changing your life, and it's huge. And I know that you want us to stay together, and we're really sorry we can't do that. But what we can do, and that's where you tell them the things that you do have in your control. And it's just important to have that understanding, that validation, that knowledge for them to as well to know, because don't underestimate what they can pick up, and that's really important. And don't underestimate how they can misinterpret things as well. So that's why we need to give them some age appropriate information there,
because otherwise they're gonna come up with their own answers themselves, and that's what we don't want to happen either, because that's so confusing for them.
Absolutely.
I can see we've got another question, Caris. So I don't know if this is a father or mother, but they're basically saying their own resilience is low right now.
Okay.
And they feel that they're not supporting their child in the way that they would like to.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that question. And again, I'd just like to reflect back on that. That's really tough for you to feel like you've listened to what we've said here and actually recognize that your own resilience is low. That is the first step. So you should be congratulated on that, because the fact that you've recognized that your own resilience is low is the first step for us to improve in it. So this is a great journey for you to start to learn about how to develop your own resilience whilst also supporting your child. And again, we always say, you can't put on your oxygen mask after your child. You need to put yours on first. So let's talk about what you can do to be able to build on your resilience. Now, that is everything that we've already gone through in our top tips. Think about your control. What do you have control of? Now, unfortunately, I don't know much about your situation with the question you've given, but I would try and look at now, what is in my control right now? What can I do this moment? So it's not about next week. It's not about in a year's time. We need to think about just for today. What can I do that is in my control that could make me feel just a little bit better? Now, that might be listening to some music that you enjoy. It might be going for a walk. It might be connecting with a friend or family member. And that's really important, that you can just recognize that one step that you can do in order, when we're thinking about those 7 C's, what are you doing to maintain connection? Okay, thinking about that. That's all part of these coping strategies that we want to develop with yourself. What are you doing that can build on that connection? Who are you connected to? In what areas, do you feel that you contribute? Maybe it'd be helpful for you to join a volunteering group if you've got that availability within your time. Or maybe it's about contributing around the house, in your own home, something that you've always wanted to fix or to change, and having a go at doing that. Bear in mind, don't overwhelm yourself with too many brand ideas. just set yourself some small tasks where you can feel like you're contributing in your home, in your family's life, or even in your community if you can. And think about your competence. What do you do well? There's plenty of things that you do well, and it's sometimes very difficult to try and unpick what that is. Sometimes we've got to
Especially
dig
when your
deep.
resilience is down. It's
Absolutely.
really, really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, and just try and think of things that you may enjoy first, you know. Often we kind of think the things we enjoy isn't something that we're competent in, you know, and it actually is, and it'll help build that sense of competence with yourself as well, you know. And again, when we're thinking about all these things, thinking about who am I connecting with? What am I contributing to my life right now? Okay. It builds on our competence. That will certainly influence our confidence. And we know with a bit of more confidence is when we start to feel a bit more resilient. And that helps with our coping strategies as well. So again, once you've developed and starting to feel a bit more resilience, apply these building blocks of resilience to your own parenting strategies. You know, when you think about the parenting strategies that we talked about, try and see how you can start to build that in your parenting strategies. And then you might feel better able to support your child, but also to recognize that when your resilience is low, you're going to feel like you're not supporting your child, and actually you might be. So just reflect on that and just try and focus on the things that you are already doing and the things that you are doing well. Thank you very much for those questions. I hope they were helpful. I'd like to say diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for joining us today for our Tonnau talks on raising resilience. My name is Caris John, and Louis Roberts has joined me today. Please join us every Tuesday, 12 till 1, where we will do a new Tonnau talk and answer questions at the end. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.